Hi, and welcome back to the DPAF. And in this podcast, I wanted to take a walk down memory lane, remembering when the Liverpool Football Club manager, Jurgen Klopp, was unvaccinated. Because he's been doing a lot of talking recently about how the unvaccinated are very dangerous people and they cause a lot of risk to the vaccinated and they cause a lot of risk to all of us. And he was even saying a few days ago how Liverpool, won't be signing players if they're not vaccinated, because the unvaccinated are just sort of too much of a risk to him, to the team, to the club. And I thought it'd be interesting to do a quick reflection back to when Jurgen Klopp himself was unvaccinated. And people listening to this are probably thinking, wow, I bet Jurgen Klopp, being such an opponent of the unvaccinated, would have been, locking himself down back in those heady days before the vaccines had been rolled out. And I wanted to point out to everyone that that couldn't be any further from reality, because back in March 2020, lockdown 1, when the Premier League had shut down, they opened up about 7 or 8 weeks later. They had a quick run of the remaining games in the schedule, and Liverpool actually won the Premier League for the first time since either 1990 or 1991. And sort of a great achievement for the club. They couldn't celebrate with their fans, but they could celebrate together. And Jurgen Klopp was on the touchline for all of those matches. So he was with the team, he was in the hotel, he was at the training ground, he was at the games, he was doing the the media interviews and all this sort of stuff. This was at a time when he was unvaccinated. So he was doing what the unvaccinated are doing now. But of course, then when it was him doing it, that was no problem. This is the double standard. Now, I'm not saying Jurgen Klopp's a bad guy. I'm not saying he's a bad manager. I'm just doing this to point out the total blatant hypocrisy that him and a lot of other people like him, do. And there's nothing wrong with being a hypocrite or being someone who embraces double standards. He probably gets it from the British government because that's what they do best. People are free to be hypocritical if they wish, but it'd just be nice if you pointed it out. Moving on to signings. Klopp says Liverpool won't make any signings of players that are unvaccinated. And so I did a quick look online, looking at whether Liverpool actually signed anyone back in the summer of 2020 or the January of 2021 at the start of this year. And I've got a list right here. Jota, Wolves, 45 million. Thiago, Bayern Munich, 25 million. Tsimikas, Olympiacos of Greece, 12 million. So he's signing these 3 players last summer, and none of them are vaccinated. So why is he doing this? I mean, if unvaccinated people are a risk to the group today, or a risk to everyone today, why is he signing unvaccinated players last summer? Were they not, or even the summer before 2020? Just between lockdown 1 and lockdown 2. Were these guys not a risk to Liverpool then? If future players are going to be a risk to Liverpool now, let's see what he says about, these players. I'm sure he's commenting on how dangerous they're going to be to the club. Quoting Jurgen Klopp on the signing of Thiago. Great, absolutely great. I'm really happy that it finally worked out and we could just do it. It's very exceptional because in our situation, a lot of people around us talk constantly, what are you doing? Then preparing something like this, working on all the different things that you have to work on a transfer like this, thinking about a player like him already is a joy, to be honest, because it gives us obviously some options. Then you get in contact with the boy and you realise, okay, he obviously likes his project as well pretty much, even before he is here, which is really nice. I learned more about him as a person, the player I knew before, the person I learned. So I'm really happy to bring this wonderful person in as an add-on to the squad, which is just good for football reasons. So there you go. I mean, he's not saying Thiago's unvaccinated, he's a bad guy, he's putting us all at risk. He's saying he's a great guy, he's a great player, he's adding something to the group he's not mentioning the coronavirus whatsoever. So why is Thiago in 2020 a good signing, whereas anyone who's vaccinated in the future, maybe January 2022, is a bad person? It does seem a little bit confusing, and it didn't stop there. I mean, in January of this year, the winter transfer window, Liverpool signed, I think it's Ben Davis from Preston for $1.5 million. They also signed Ozan Kabak from Schalke, $1.5 million loan fee. And Jurgen Klopp signed these two players in January of this year, again before the vaccines. Again, these guys are all unvaccinated. He's bringing them into the club. He's bringing them into the group. He's saying these are great guys. And yet they're not vaccinated. So how is it that people going forward are going to be a threat to their team, or vaccinated players, whereas he was bringing in unvaccinated players to an unvaccinated team, and he was saying how great they are? So Klopp has signed a total, from my list, of 6 players since the start of the COVID pandemic, all of whom were unvaccinated, and there's no reference anywhere that I can see that he's critical of these people for being unvaccinated at the time they signed, that they're bringing a risk into the club. All of them, apart from Ben Davis, are coming from foreign countries. And, so I feel like I made my point that Klopp bringing out this statement that is against unvaccinated transfers is total blatant hypocrisy. And of course, this coercion of vaccine coercion, goes against the Nuremberg Code, something that was brought in response to the Second World War, when Britain had to go to war against the German government. Klopp is a German person plying his trade in England, as is free to do, but yet, lecturing to the British people on how they should conduct their health care. And, one final point, people are probably wondering, well, why is Jurgen Klopp putting himself at risk during this coronavirus? Why is he putting his team at risk? Why is he putting his fellow members of the coaching staff at the club at risk? And maybe it's something to do with the fact that he earns north of £10 million a year in his job. So some of you listening to this, you may have lost your business, you may have been out of work, you may have been on furlough, you may have not been able to work when you wanted to, but at least Jurgen Klopp was able to work. At least he was able to earn his, north of £10 million a year salary, and he thought that was more important to him than protecting the lives of people around him, those unvaccinated people that he's criticizing today. So I hope you like this video. Hope it's proved some food for thought. There's a lot of people out there criticizing the unvaccinated, but yet, they themselves were happy to prance around back in the pre-vaccine days and not point out the glaring hypocrisy. So thanks very much for listening. Please subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.